Welcome again to Believers Fellowship Bible Time. I'm Pastor Bruce, and we're going along with our daily Bible reading schedule. And today it's Deuteronomy 29, 30, and 31. There's an awful lot to look at in those three chapters, very important chapters. Let me just try to break it down for you, help give you some handles that you can use to help you think through everything that's in these chapters. First of all, remember the flow of the book. We talked about talks about what God did in the past in the first four chapters. Then chapters 5 through 26, it talked about what God expects in the present, and then it started talking about the future. And so we're wrapping up the future section here in chapters 29 and 30, and then chapter 31 starts the conclusion of the book, talking about the end of Moses' life and his last words. There. So that'll help you kind of understand the flow. And here's four words that can maybe help you think your way through these chapters. One word would be covenant. Covenant is a big word in the book of Deuteronomy. Covenant is a big word in this section. Chapter 29, verse 1 says, these are the words of the covenant. It's the covenant. And really what this is a renewal of the covenant that God made at Horeb or Sinai, and it's now being renewed, repeated for the new generation, the generation that's about to enter into the land, and all subsequent. And Moses says, I'm saying this to you and to people who aren't here, which are the subsequent generations. And in talking about this covenant, you'll notice in these chapters that Moses talks a great deal about how, this is the way it's going to go down. You guys are going to break this covenant. You're going to abandon this covenant. You're going to reject God and his word, and God's going to reject you, and you're going to suffer incredibly. But by the time you get to chapter 30, verse 6, there is some hope that is presented, because it says, and the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your offspring, so that you will love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and that you may live. So that's talking about a future time when God's going to restore the people of Israel. They're going to repent, and their hearts are going to be circumcised. That's an anticipation of, it's not a statement of, but an anticipation of the coming new covenant, which is spoken of in detail in Jeremiah 31 and Ezekiel 36. And then once that happens, that new covenant happens, they get circumcised heart, they all turn to the Lord. Verse 7 says, and the Lord your God will put all these curses on your foes and enemies who persecuted you. Now that's echoes from the Abrahamic covenant, Genesis 12:3, where God told Abraham, hey, those who bless you, I'll bless them. Those who curse you, I'll curse you. So think about all of these centuries where people of Israel have been cursed by every other nation pretty much. But it's going to all get turned around at that coming time. And so it's important to remember covenants. The covenant, the old covenant, the Sinai covenant, the Mosaic covenant, which is a conditional covenant, which they're going to reject and break and suffer. But there's also other covenants in play. There's going to be a new covenant that's going to come up, an unconditional one. And there is also going to be a remembering of the unconditional Abrahamic covenant. So that's one way to remember it. Also, though, at the end of all this talk about the covenant and the future of what's going to happen, at the end of chapter 30, verses 11 through 20, he talks about commitment. There would be your second word, commitment. He says here some amazing things at the beginning of this section about how, hey, this covenant that I'm making with you, this law that I'm laying down for you, it's not inaccessible. It's available. It's clear. It's understandable. The only question is, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to respond to it? Are you going to make a commitment to it? And he tells them, hey, I've put before you life and death. You choose. You should choose life. And you would think that would be the obvious choice. But it comes down to, hey, here's this covenant that I'm making with you. You obey, you get blessed. You disobey, you're going to suffer incredibly. So which way are you going to choose? Well, it's going to be amazing to see which way they're going to choose. But it comes down to a personal commitment to the Lord. And so he calls them to commitment. So covenant and a commitment. And then in chapter 31, you see a commission. We're reminded that Moses, he's not going to go in. And so a new leader is appointed, and that's going to be Joshua. And just imagine, Joshua's there. They're going through this whole ceremony. They go to the tent of meeting. God talks and affirms Joshua is the man. But just think about some of the things Joshua is hearing there. He hears, for example, 31:16, the Lord said to Moses, behold, you're about to lie down with your fathers. Then this people will rise and whore after the foreign gods among them in the land that they are entering, and they will forsake me and break my covenant that I have made with them. Joshua, these are the people you're going to lead. Verse 29, Moses says, for I know that after my death you will surely act corruptly and turn aside from the way that I have commanded you, and in the days to come evil will befall you, because you will not do what is evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger through the works of your hands. Here you go, Joshua. Take these people over. Lead them in. So it's not an easy job Joshua is inheriting, and so you can understand why in verse 6 there, in talking about this, it says to Joshua, be strong and courageous. Do not fear or be in dread of them, for it is the Lord your God who goes with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Then Moses summoned Joshua and said to him in the sight of all Israel, be strong and courageous, for you shall go you shall go with this people into the land that the Lord has sworn to their fathers to give them, and you will put them in possession of it. It is the Lord who goes before you. He will be with you. He will not leave you or forsake you. Do not fear or be dismayed. Yeah, so Joshua, he's got to lead this group of people into the land. They're gonna have to do battle with the nations that are already there. And so the call to Joshua is, hey, nobody said this is going to be easy, but you need to be strong and courageous, and you need to remember that the Lord is with you, and he's not going to forsake you, and he's going to lead the way. Boy, those are good words for anybody today, anybody in leadership. You got to keep your eyes on the Lord. You got to be strong and courageous, do what he says to do with the full confidence that he is right there with you. Just like in the Great Commission, Jesus said, go and make disciples, and lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. And so that's the commission. The last thing I want to mention, last word, we've talked about covenant, commitment, commission. Last word is a caution. All through these chapters, there is not only the warning, but the prophecy of coming apostasy. People are going to turn away from God. They're going to turn away from his law. They're going to choose death over life. There's a coming apostasy. And so here's the word, caution. Covenant, commitment, commission, and caution. You need to prepare people. You need to warn people. Hey, this is what God said. Doesn't have to be true of you. And here's the ways to avoid it. In fact, in chapter 31, verse 13, it says that we're to be careful to hear the words of the law, and that their children who have not known it may hear and learn to fear the Lord your God as long as you live in the land that you're going over the Jordan to possess. Hey, it's really important that you teach your children. The greatest group, largest percentage of apostates are people who grew up in the church. They grew up, they heard it all, and probably going along, they acknowledge, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. But then at some point they walk away. Too much was taken for granted in regards to those children. They weren't trained up in the way they should go. And so there's the warning there. Hey, apostasy is coming. Apostasy is a reality. You need to be on the lookout. You need to be aware. You need to be warning people, and that starts with your own children. And then he says in chapter 29, verse 18 and 19, listen to this. It says, beware lest there be among you a man or woman or clan or tribe whose heart is turning away today from the Lord our God to go and serve the gods of those nations. Beware lest there be among you a root bearing a poisonous and bitter fruit, one who, when he hears the words of this sworn covenant, blesses himself in his heart, saying, I shall be safe, though I walk in the stubbornness of my own heart. See, that's going to happen. And we're to be aware. We're to be on the lookout for that. And that sounds a lot like what we've been learning in the book of Hebrews about being on the lookout for each other, cautioning each other, warning each other. For example, in Hebrews chapter 3, starting in verse 12, it says, Take care, brothers, lest there be in any of you an evil, unbelieving heart, leading you to fall away from the living God. But exhort one another every day, as long as it's called today, that none of you be hardened by the deceitfulness of sin. It's calling us, it's telling us, hey, apostasy is a reality. It happens. You need to watch out for each other. And in fact, the verses I just read to you in Deuteronomy are quoted in Hebrews chapter 12 and verse 15, where it says, see to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. See, apostasy doesn't just affect like one person. It has a way of spreading. That's what they're saying to Israel back in Deuteronomy. That's what they're saying to the church in the book of Hebrews. It happens. It happens. And it happens in the church today. You think of the 5 out of the 7 churches that Jesus warned in Revelation 2 and 3. 5 of them, he said, repent or else. And the sad story is they all chose the or else. That's why we have fellowship groups at Believers Fellowship. It's not just times to get together and hold hands and sing songs. It's a time to get involved in one another's life. It's a time to encourage one another, build up one another, watch out for one another. You need to be seriously committed to a fellowship group. And being in that fellowship group needs to be a priority for you all the time. And that you're committed to the people in that group, and you're watching out for each other. We're part of a family, and we're trying to help each other to be faithful all the way to the end. And so there's lots of things to take away from this section. Maybe that's one that you could think about and apply in your own life. Well, I trust you'll have a great weekend. We're looking forward to the services that we're going to do on Sunday. We're going to do the morning live stream. We're going to do a Sunday night live stream of a question and answer time. And then we're preparing. In fact, we're practicing some things this week in preparation for the next week when we will be able to open up and people can come to the service. So be in prayer for that, and we'll see you next week for more Bible time.